Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining in today. I appreciate a lot of people are probably in a holiday as we speak. Especially as we're now relatively free from the worst effect of lockdown. We've got the delightful Raymond Holt on with us this afternoon. So hello, Raymond. Lovely. Thank you very
Hi,
much.
Rupert.
Good afternoon. Yeah, obviously, what would be really good for those who've already joined us, if you could very kindly just say hello in the chat and confirm that audio and video is fine, that'd be really helpful. And it's also slightly more challenging as well, because we find with YouTube, there's about normally a 30-second delay, Facebook about 15 seconds, so we don't always see everything straight away, but that's what makes it more exciting. So as far as today is concerned, what we're going to be covering, just let me share my screen. We're going to be discussing with Raymond the key, discovering the key to achieving wealth growth. Now, we've used that word quite deliberately, because in reality, yes, wealth is about money, but actually it's also about richness of life as well. And I think most of us are actually motivated, yes, about money. That's really nice to have, but we also, I think many of us actually do like to fundamentally make a difference. So I know there's a conversation I had with Raymond a couple of weeks ago, which made me really feel that he'd be a great contributor today. So I'm very grateful for you joining in. So in terms of a quick intro on that, thank you, Mike, for confirming. It's delighted to be able to join us, by the way. So what we'd really like to do is, to those who are joining us right now as we speak, is just share what you're really passionate about. Also a little bit why you do it, what really drives you, what motivates you, and be bold with your questions. The more questions we have, the more we love it, the more interaction that we can get and also give back in terms of feeding value. And we just a tiny bit of background about myself. Business Growth Leader was formed about 7.5 years ago. One of the things I feel very strongly about is the importance of building circular relationships. And as we even include suppliers into that mix, because you would think actually some people might think they're not so important because it's almost like a one-way relationship. We'd argue the complete opposite. If you try and think about all the stakeholders that you work with and make them feel good about the relationship, then that stands people in your good stead. Now, Mira would normally be with me today. She's actually on holiday in Ramsgate, coming down from the Wirral. Although I did catch up with her briefly yesterday for a few drinks, but obviously we're sort of missing her a little bit today, so no doubt she'll be back to normal next month. Mary, welcome. Thank you very much for confirming your attendance today, and do share what you're really passionate about as well. That'd be fantastic. Now, moving on a little bit from here, one of the things that I feel, I know, Raymond, I think you feel very passionate about this as well, is that if you can run a business with a real sense of social purpose, then to me, that makes business all worthwhile. And it should be about always trying to do the right thing and think how you can support people. But that also does include our families in that as well. So I think we can all feel guilty at times by spending too much time on certain things, and certainly I do. And it's very important to remember that part too, that our families and friends are very important. So, but the fundamental part around this is that if you can get behind 2 or 3 of these United Nations global goals, and somehow embed that in what you do, both personally but also in your organization, then I think that's so really good. And so in terms of what we feel very strongly about is we want to be here for the benefit of our members, and obviously we're very lucky because we've got members who are keen supporters as well. We do want to promote wealth growth as well as business growth with a sense of social purpose. And obviously, it sounds a bit soft, this and so on, but if we're happy, we can create a bit of wealth as well and successful, then clearly that's a way of actually spreading the opportunity to a much wider audience. And tying in a bit more directly into that more meaningful way, we won't discuss in any real depth today, but what we'd like to do is to give people the same advantage that the very large corporate entities have got in terms of being able to plug into mechanisms as ways of creating financial wealth, and which gives you sort of life choices, as it were, but also in particular how you can, in a business context, bring yourselves forward, put strategies in place to amplify your brand, and get your time back. And that sounds easier said than done. But a lot of that can be through getting lots of support from ourselves and our members, and the other way around. But if you get those strategies right around that, then obviously you're building then a strong business. And because we want to see people succeed, in fact, Raymond and I were having a conversation before we went on today about, C-bills and bibbles and whatever they are. I can't remember what they all are now. We felt we wanted to do our own little part of it. So we've created what we class as our own special growth fund, which is surprisingly unbureaucratic. Normally you have to go through about 500 hoops to get what you need to be able to see your business grow. And we can, in some circumstances, make up to £20,000 available. Obviously, we do ask for a little bit of something in return, because if we're giving some value to that extent, we'd like to know that we can make this sustainable in the long term, not just in the short term. So moving on a little bit from that now, how we tend to do this, certainly from a business growth perspective, is that we like to work with people to help them to generate a strong lead flow of opportunities through our lead generation, prospect nurturing, sales optimization systems, and everything around brand amplification, i.e. how to get your message out there, and with the objective of bringing your sales forward, amplifying your brand, and getting your time back. We've got a very good solution, which technological solution, which actually can create new opportunities which is largely on autopilot. I don't like that word because actually it's so badly misused. But anyway, you've heard enough about me or Business Growth Bureau for a moment. What I'd really like to do is to come to Raymond. And I think, Raymond, you're, just let me switch this back so we can see you properly. What would be really good to just understand a lot more about you, Raymond. So if you could give a little bit of a personal introduction in terms of what you've done before, how you transitioned into what you're doing now, and how you like to make a bit of a difference over about 90 seconds or so. That'd be lovely, if that's okay with you. And thanks very much for your contribution.
No, that's all right, no problems. And what's really worrying is I think I'm wearing the same shirt as in that photo, which is not planned. So that wasn't the plan. So yeah, I'm, from a career perspective, I'm a finance director and a business coach, been an FD for many, many years, but my passion has always been working with small business, but with family. And even when I was FD within a professional services firm, the conversations were always very personal around what does this mean for you? And yes, the business might want you to bill loads and millions of pounds, but fundamentally that has an impact on you, your family life, and whether that actually aligns with what you want to achieve. So I've always worked in that way. So 6 years ago, I decided for personal reasons as well. At the time, my dad wasn't particularly well. My mother-in-law wasn't particularly well. I was stuck where I was. It was about my wife's family's halfway around the world either way. So we were looking for flexibility as well as a new challenge for me to move forward. So, and then over the last 6 years, with plenty of family challenges, and up until recently when I lost my dad, and during that time we lost my mother-in-law as well, we've been able to kind of balance the kind of lifestyle we want and look to build a business here together that basically is built from the foundations and the values that we have. So it's I do my best to live my own business vision, Rupert.
Yeah, good. I know that's lovely. And I think what's really impressed me the other day when I spoke with you was the fact that we really started talking about in much more detail about what you did and how you'd like to make a difference. There's a whole new part I learned about you, which I didn't realize before. And this is how this whole area around working with entrepreneurs, but recognizing there usually is a spouse or a partner involved. And as a consequence, even if that person isn't involved directly in the business, it has a direct personal impact. And actually trying to marry up, what the founder of the business wants to do versus what is important for the spouse and the family can be two very different things. And I'm sure that those of you who've joined us on the call today will probably recognise some of those challenges. Certainly I do. I'm quite used to having a rolling pin on one side and a frying pan on the other. So I'm sure that you've probably saved many marriages without realising it, Raymond. So it's perhaps a little bit of credit to go there. So, but there we go. So I just want to quickly pick up on Mary, just to say thank you very much for sharing what you're really passionate about. That's interesting, actually, Mary. It's what ties in very well with what we're just talking about. Mike G, do tell us a little bit more about what you're really passionate about as well. And those of you who've joined us the last few minutes, do share, because we can make this a lot of fun. And let's just go back a moment, and we'll move forwards a little bit onto the main topic for today's session. We've basically got these 5 things we'd very much like to discuss today. Again, do interact, ask questions. And the topic is, for those of you who weren't with us in the last first minute or so of the broadcast, is about discovering the key to achieving wealth growth. So, Raymond, as a general point, this whole thing about understanding why your motivation, why do you feel this is so important both in a personal context, but also in a business context?
Yeah, I think there is fundamentally one context, Rupert, and that is that the personal and business are not mutually exclusive. They are aligned, or work best when they are aligned. And it's interesting when Mary says about work-life balance. It's I think one of the things I've come to experience over the last sort of 6 years in particular is there's just a balanced life. And that doesn't mean 50-50. It means about the right balance in the right way. And I think too often we don't take the time to actually and it's hard. And I think it's part of the reason it's very hard to actually sit down and work out what we genuinely want more than beyond the end of our nose. And I think it's really hard, and it can be quite abstract, which is also very challenging. But I do think that until we do the personal piece and we actually sit down with our partners and our family and fundamentally with our children as well. Now that's context orientated depending on how old they are, but you can still do this. I think until we do that, I'm not sure how we align we can do the business piece and be kind of very smart about it and build a business that does good marketing, sells a lot of good stuff. But actually, if it's not aligned with what we actually want, what we end up with, as Stephen Covey always says, is you find out the ladder's against the wrong building after 20 years of building a business, and or worse, you turn around and nobody's there. So I think I'm not sure they're not mutually exclusive. They're very much aligned. Wow,
that's a big one, actually. So Stephen Covey said that, did he?
Yeah, there's a bit in 7 Habits where he talks about getting to the top of a ladder and then looking over at the other building and going, actually, I wanted to be over there.
Right. Yeah, and then you live with regrets rather than the other way around. Yes, and that's a really interesting one, isn't it? And I think the analogy I'd give around this as well is that if you looked at, especially at the last 18 months, it's been a very challenging time for lots of people. In some cases, there's been massive amounts of opportunity as well. Whole new bits have been created because of what's happened. But actually, equally, the other side of it has been a massive loss of, people, first loss of life, but of course, this whole situation about businesses, collapsing. In fact, I was absolutely staggered actually because there's a really big hotel literally right next door to East Croydon Station. East Croydon is probably, if you imagine the Office and Slough, East Croydon's become a bit more like a Slough. So I don't like to own up to it particularly, but there's a massive hotel there and it's just completely closed down.
Yep.
And yet it's 100 yards from a station. It's pretty modern. It's comfortable. It's close to all the restaurants and things like that as well. But obviously it's not being, no doubt it'll get taken over by someone. But it's just, you wouldn't expect that, type of devastation to occur. And then again, I think, don't know why particularly Croydon, but there's large parts of Croydon as well, whereas retail has just largely disappeared. Other town centres seem to be stuck very well. I know my wife, who loves blue water, I asked her the other day, and she said to me, actually, it's pretty almost full occupancy there. It's very busy. So it seems that certain regions particularly have been quite badly hit. But the reason I'm sort of touching on that particularly is this goes back to your why, your motivation, because the real entrepreneurs are the ones which, when the tough, it does get tough, they're the ones which will actually be determined to fight their way through it. And that's because their personal values and their why and their motivation in both the personal context and business context, they're well aligned. Now, we all know things can be out of control, but I think that's something that you personally feel very strongly about as well, don't you? That in terms of working with your clients, would you say that is the case, or is there anything you'd like to add in that context there?
No, I think one of the things, you're absolutely right, Rupert. And one of the things I would say about what I've experienced working with my clients is the alignment of their personal why and business why. A lot of it has actually come from their partner, because what you find is that when you're trying to build the business is you get to a point where where there is a conflict of both. And well, I had this conversation with my wife not that long ago, where you get to a point where it's like the business owner you wants to really go and grow really, really desperately at that point. Yet the burden on the family will be exceptionally high, or could be exceptionally high. And not necessarily is that growth, or the way that growth is going to come about, the way that you have discussed and at that time agreed. And sometimes what we need as business owners is a tap on the shoulder that just it's an amber light, not a red light, Rupert. It's the amber light that says, slow down, talk to us about it, let's get aligned. And rather than going off at a tangent and finding out once you've started that, oh my God, this isn't where I wanted to go, take the opportunity to slow down a little bit, have the conversation that says, this is all it is. It's an amber light. Yeah, maybe the amber light will turn red, but maybe the amber light will turn green, but you'll go knowing that you go together with it.
Yeah. Wow. And again, if you can get the multiple stakeholders involved with that, in a business context, especially if you've got a board of directors or a team, making sure they're well aligned, and also at home, so you can make sure the personal business values are well aligned, then that's really good, isn't it? And I was discussing with someone yesterday, actually, obviously keep everything anonymous for obvious reasons, but this particular person runs a very small business, but pretty successful in quite a boutique sector of the market as well. And she was explaining that effectively she has a business where it's 50-50 split, and what's happened has become a major imbalance in the business, and obviously over time that could start to become quite problematic. But you're almost a bit like the equivalent of the Marjorie Proops of the business world, aren't you? You somehow seem to be able to pull all these bits together and make people help people go all in the same direction. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot. I think when we talk about working with family, there's not this massive difference to as what you've just described around having a board of directors and ensuring everyone's aligned and having all the stakeholder views in mind. It's the same with family. And I think when you talk about an example I use is that if you had two business owners, if you had partners in a business, you typically have a third wheel who would be maybe potentially advising them or acting as the counsel or Jiminy Cricket for them. Yeah. So one of the things which I say to clients, and I say to anyone who wants to engage their family, is don't try and do it on your own. Bring your partner into the room with you, but have that third wheel in the room with you, so that you can have a conversation that actually works in the same way as you would if there was two of you working with a coach. And I think if you can do that, you actually bring everything, you kind of bring it together in a way that when you're building a business, it feels natural in terms of the process and the thought process, maybe slightly more emotive because you have your partner in the room and you have your family engaged. But fundamentally, in terms of process, it's a very, very similar wheel. And therefore, you don't feel out of kilter in terms of the process you go through. Just the people in the room are different.
Right. That's really interesting, actually, because you've also got a very good memory, Raymond, because you've automatically almost led straight into the next point we were going to have as a point for discussion, which is really, and this is really about, what is your personal 5-year plan? And it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because quite often there is a major misalignment there. And actually looking forward 6 or 12 months can be a challenge, especially what's happened last 18 months.
Yeah.
But also, I personally talk about the importance of making sure you've got your postcode in your sat nav. So even if you do go off route multiple times, you've got different options to bring you back on track again. But in a personal context, obviously we talk about more the business context in just a moment. Have you got some sort of tips around that in terms of working both with the directors in the business, but you've already alluded to some really good points at a personal level, but how can people really stay focused on that 5-year plan in that context when the whole world around us is just moving and changing so quickly?
Yeah, well, that's really challenging, because I would say that even here, the plan 5 years ago to where we are today is like chalk and cheese in comparison. And I think one of those elements is you need to, if you create the plan as you see it right now, but from an emotive perspective, don't beat yourself up if you don't get there. Look at the success that you have achieving what you do achieve. Because I think sometimes we look back after 5 years, and if I was to look back now compared to 5 years ago, this is nothing like what I expected. But actually, the richness of life and the learning and the where we find ourselves today is so much different, actually, in a much better platform for going forward than probably we were 5 years ago. And I think there's that, celebrate the success as you move forwards towards that. And if that horizon keeps moving 5 years on, that it's an horizon for a reason, in the sense that it's actually every time we get closer to it, it moves. We don't ever reach there, but what we do is we achieve so much behind us, we don't spend enough time. And I certainly think from a family perspective, my experience has been business owners don't take enough, or rarely take enough time to celebrate with their families the success they have as a family because of what they've been able to do.
I think it's very easy to have forget about the wins.
Yes.
I find this interesting enough from a sales point of view, because I love speaking with potential clients and also really helping people, and I suspect you're very similar to that. And it's really strange, but once, for me, the real sense of fun and achievement is when you've actually helped people to get to a point where they come to that purchasing decision, but then also help them through on the other side as well. And you should celebrate those wins. At the end of the day, and it's so easy to forget to do that. And then, of course, it's about trying to involve your partner in that as well. In a personal level too, isn't it? So that. And perhaps going out to celebrate, when that happens, make sure you have times for that date night or whatever it might be. So, because I think the thing that came to me really home a few weeks ago was when we ran one of our Wealth Growth Club sessions, and I'm not sure whether you were part of that one or not, or whether it was the other one, but what I actually ran 2 different streams. So one from the personal point of view, one the other part. And I tried to ask each person to separate their personal life versus their business life, and the other way around. And it became impossible. Literally we went round as part of a group to discuss a whole range of things, but it was so obvious people's personal lives and business lives were so intertwined people just couldn't separate the two out. Every time you try to bring people back and say, look, let's look at this, within about 20 seconds or so, it would revert back to being the same thing. So that is something I think I found really interesting. And,
yeah,
how do people get that balance right with all of this?
and part of that is actually, and it's really, really, and it is hard, is actually to create time for yourself where you don't think about work. And I have to say that has been one of the, I suppose in some ways it's become easier over the last 2 or 3 months since my dad passed away, because that was part of such a big part of my life. But actually to ring fence time that is mine or is ours as a family and has absolutely nothing to do with work. And in that respect, it's harder and easier because my wife is the one who said, because for example, on Sunday morning, she's like, you're not working. And the point being that I haven't seen you work for a long time on a Sunday morning. And I'm like, no, I am going to hold the line. That is what we have agreed as a family, that it's our time. It's for us to go and do what we want to do. And actually to kind of separate the two in that way, which is painful. It's very painful. But actually, by creating that time for us, has actually enabled me to, and us as a family, to actually have some downtime, which then means when you go back into the business, you've got the energy and don't therefore find every 5 minutes talking about the business, because it's really easy to, I could sit here and talk forever about the business, but I just need to look across the table and get the, there's enough here right now. And when the kids start falling asleep at dinner, we've had enough.
Yeah. How old are your kids, Raymond?
14 and 12, so they're old enough to understand.
Yes, and probably the 14-year-old especially is probably at an age where they definitely don't think what mum and dad do is cool.
Well, they looks at me and he goes, "Oh God, again?" It's like, really? It's fine. No. We'll stop the conversation.
No, that's interesting, isn't it? I just want to pick up on what Mike said, actually, Mike G. It's very interesting what you're saying about helping others. And I've learned something else about you, Mike, which I didn't know earlier on, about primitive skills, and particularly working with school governance and mentoring graduates and student career development opportunities. Is this a little bit of a transition for you, Mike? Have you sort of changed what you do a little bit over the last 12 months, or have I just possibly missed a little bit out in terms of what I recall from our previous discussions? And actually on that, do share, what you're really passionate about as well. And Mary as well. Anyone else who's joined us too, do say hello and do introduce yourself as well. So put something in the chat or whatever you'd like, and we'd love to pick up on that. And so I suppose the next part, really, I think we sort of partly covered this, but how does all of this that we talked about today basically impact our business plan?
Well, the business is, and for me, the business is an economic engine that has a purpose. And yes, we talk about business purpose in the context of it needs to change people's lives and everything else, but its purpose is to deliver for the family. And that's why I always have we talk about lifestyle businesses, Rupert, and I shudder because every business is supposed to provide a lifestyle. That's one of the core aims of having a business, isn't it? Yeah. So a business plan that doesn't align with family is going to cause pain, because I use the analogy of the Victoria sponge, the jam and cream in the middle that has to bring those two sponges together, the business and the family, is the business owner.
Yeah.
And if you don't, by not aligning those two plans, by not bringing your business to your family, the one who's going to really, really suffer in the middle is the person who's supposed to be building and connecting these two together. Because we forget about because all that happens is we try to then go, if you remember in the 80s, was it the stretchy arm man who used to stretch, and all you're trying to do is bring them together. And if you design it the way that works for you, you will then design your engagement, as in the business owner, how you work best by bringing both your family and your business together. It will then deliver. And when you're having a conversation about what it needs to do, it has an objective in mind.